Ambassador Lighthizer, under your leadership at USTR, you put a priority on prioritizing U.S. economic security by challenging really unfair and discriminatory barriers in trade and help set protections for U.S. businesses, workers, and our economy. So far under the Biden administration, they've largely left in place the status quo of tariffs and other trade policies that were present at the end of the Trump administration. To some extent, this speaks to the bipartisan support you earned for many of your trade policies you helped develop when you were here. However, myself and many others are concerned that stagnant and cautious trade policies are inadequate currently to defensively counter China's economic manipulation on the global stage, or to offensively counter China by working proactively with partners and allies around the world to advance our interests. Can you comment or give us an opinion? Do you agree with the Biden administration's current stagnant approach to trade enforcement with China? And what would you recommend in terms of utilizing additional trade enforcement tools like the mechanism used in phase one?
Well, thank you, Congressman. First of all, yeah, I appreciate the comment. And with respect to the tariffs that we put in place, I think it's a compliment to the Biden administration that they have kept them in place. And like every administration, there are good people who understand this issue, and there are some who don't understand it, and they have the same mix that all the other administrations do. So there's kind of like two questions. One, I think, what else would I do? And then two, how would I work with allies, all right? So let me say, first of all, as I've said in my written testimony, I believe that China is not in compliance with the agreement that they entered into, and if I were in government, I would use the authority under U.S. law to raise tariffs on them and to further this process of decoupling, which I believe we started. And really started under the 301 in a bipartisan way, right? It really was. I mean, and when I would testify, I would quote the former speaker and others who were in agreement with that position. So if I were in the government, I would now raise those tariffs. I'd have tariffs across the board. I would take the next step in decoupling. That's what I would do. At least, I mean, I should say that's what I would recommend. Obviously, the president would make the decision. In terms of working with allies, clearly, we need to have a positive agenda. I am not one, however, that believes we need additional FTAs or that we should be doing anything to help our allies like us more by giving more U.S. jobs away, right? So, I mean, and at some point we ought to have that discussion. That is, in fact, my view. I think there is a positive agenda you can have. There's a lot of things that you can talk about in the technology area that we ought to be doing. Some of them, by the way, this administration is talking about. I mean, personally, for example, I would want to see people come together and have some kind of a carbon border adjustment, right? Not a carbon tax, I'm not for that, but a carbon border adjustment. There's things in trade law enforcement, there's things in customs facilitation, there's a lot of things you can do with allies to kind of create kind of a brand that I think is helpful.
And Ambassador Lighthizer, is it your current position, I read your testimony, that there should be no outbound investment at all to China? So,
in the first place, I would defer to Roger on these things and to Dr. Schmidt on the technology stuff, because those are their areas and they're better by far than I am in understanding them. In my judgment, with all due respect, I think reciprocity is a good policy, by the way, across the board with everyone all the time. But in my judgment, there is no justification. But if someone could have one, I would say put severe restrictions on. That's why I was kind of vague about that. I think that the direction should be to limit it substantially. And the wisdom of this committee is as good as any other wisdom to decide where exactly those lines should be drawn. I'm not going to say I know the answer to everything, but in my opinion, we should not be, if you cross the line and say they are a hostile adversary and they're trying to bring us down, once you cross that line, then it all looks different. And this is one thing that looks different. It's not about whether some guy in New York can buy a big boat with the money that he made on some deal, right? It's about whether or not we're going to have our kids have this kind of a country and our grandkids have it. That's what it's about, and those are not kind of the same kind of thing. So for me, I would say, sorry to the guy in New York. You just have to deal with the boat you have, and I'm going to worry more about the the woman with the hard hat going to work.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Michelle.